There's something going on out on San Antonio's far west side that has a lot of people paying attention to it. And depending on which area you're looking at moving to, this could literally change everything. San Antonio has 50 data centers currently built or under construction right now. And that makes us one of the fastest growing data center markets in the whole country. But now finally, our own city council members are starting to pay attention. They're starting to raise concerns about how this is going to affect our power, our water, and just our overall way of life. And so today we're going to talk about it a little bit more in depth and talk about whether it's, as bad as I say it is, or if there is some brightness to the horizon. So most of these data centers are actually packed out on that far west side of San Antonio and also in that northwest corner of town too. But they are just massive, massive giants. I mean, they look like big warehouses. They're windowless. They've got, just huge, huge spans as the buildings themselves. And these are some big names too. We're talking Microsoft with a, big campus out there west of 211. You've also got a new $400 million facility going out near Castroville as well. And when it comes to how it's going to affect the residents, Rick Galvan, who's the council member for that side of town, that specific district where these are going up, he put in a formal request asking the city to take a deep dive into how this is going to affect the power and the water for that area. But these aren't stopping at the Bexar County line either. You look at some of these rural properties and these data centers are starting to go even further out away from the big cities. Wilson County, where Lavernia and Floresville are located just southeast of San Antonio, is currently in the spotlight as a 2,700-acre AI data center and renewable energy farm is being proposed to be developed just north of Stockdale, right off of Highway 123, which is basically between Stockdale and Seguin. I couldn't tell you the reason why they're going out there instead of doing it, closer into San Antonio where there's a higher concentration of people. But there's I'm sure lots of people that have lots of opinions on that. Obviously, with that specific area and the droughts that we've had, the biggest concern is the water solutions because the numbers out there that people are talking about is that these data centers can take up to millions of gallons of water per day. And whenever it comes to these drought conditions that we do have, they're very, very concerned, and rightly so, that these data centers could pull water from, necessary resources that the citizens and the residents of these areas need to survive, whether it's for themselves personally or for their livelihood, which is these cattle ranches in a lot of places. So let's talk about why people are extremely worried about this. And of course, the first one is the power grid. Most of the largest new power requests in the state of Texas are coming from data centers currently. And that already places a strain on a power grid that has definitely seen its share of failures in recent years. If you look back to SOVID of 2021, whenever we had that huge freeze here in Texas and everything shut down, the Texas power grid was struggling mightily. Power was off for a lot of places for multiple days in a row. There was a big problem with the power grid back then, and then you add all these other data centers on top of it with the amount of power that they have to use to just operate, and there's a lot of concerns regarding that. And then when it comes to the water, this part is a little bit trickier than a lot of people understand. So it's not just the fact that they have to use a lot of water, because they do. These systems have to be cooled by water. That is what power plants use. That is what just about everything uses to cool down, is flooding water onto hot equipment, right? It's run into the system. It's built that way, right? These specific data centers, especially when you look at the older ones, they do pull water directly out of the water supply for those areas. Now, the newer systems that they're starting to talk about, and again, I don't know how widespread all this information is. I did a ton of research. There is not a lot out there about this. So I would really love y'all's input and would love to have a really in-depth conversation in the comments here about what is the benefit of these data centers that use closed loop systems. And a closed loop system specifically is one that fills that system with chilled water, and it cycles it through. In fact, if you look at a relatively recent article from Microsoft, they have created a design that uses zero water cooling technology, which basically eliminates the need altogether for water to be used in cooling these AI data centers. Now, it's still used for general administrative purposes, for offices, restrooms, things like that, but to actually cool the equipment, it's not using water that's coming in. And that, to me, is the biggest, or I guess the second biggest concern with these data centers outside of the power. Now, getting into it, how it affects the day-to-day life of everybody that live around these data centers. When you think about it, if your house backed up to this nice, beautiful farm and ranch property, got a nice view, loved it, that's why you moved there, you had that green space. Obviously, you never know what could be built back there. apartment buildings, another neighborhood, or a data center. Obviously, if a data center is built behind your neighborhood, behind your house, and you can see it from your house, that is going to affect your property value. For sure, somebody coming into that house to look to buy it, seeing that out their back window, they're not going to love it. And especially when it comes to nighttime, I mean, especially these things, they are big industrial buildings. Like, you're going to be filled with light all the time. It's just the way that it is. And you know, the city of San Antonio is looking at redoing the zoning around these data centers to make sure that they are built at least 1,000 feet away from any residential areas, parks, and those types of things to make the impact on the residents as minimal as they possibly can. I say that it will affect property values. One study actually came back and said that it doesn't. In fact, this study actually showed that the prices went up whenever there's a house near a data center. However, I can tell you just from my personal experience and you can probably imagine, as you're going into a property, anything that backs up to a commercial industrial property is not going to be as appealing as if it were not backing up to that. So it's one of those things where I think a lot of the data centers are built in growing areas. Those growing areas tend to have appreciation long term. And so that's kind of where it's just kind of like a one-in-one situation where the data centers are just built in areas that are already appreciating because of the need for something like that in those areas. Now, these data centers do provide jobs, but it is mostly construction jobs. The data centers themselves don't have big employment whenever it comes to the operational needs of the facility itself. Now, that's just with the highly developed areas. Now, when we're talking about these rural areas, I haven't found any research that shows anything specific about that. But if you look at a place out like Medina County, Castroville, more of a rural, smaller town, or especially looking at a place like Stockdale, any property that backs up to these big data centers, especially if it's a ranch property, overall, especially on the long-term value of that property, as soon as that data center is built, if there's a property right next to it you tried to sell, it is going to be significantly lower in value than what it would be. And that's just a very easy to see fact of that. It's more of a supply and demand issue, right? Because the buyers that are looking at these properties, they want their privacy, they want their peace. And if they're going to buy a 50 to 100 acre piece of property and spend a lot of money on that property, and they have to stare at a big renewable energy farm and data center with that property, they're going to look the other way and go somewhere else for sure. But again, if you are looking at buying in the San Antonio area or selling even, reach out to us at the Life and SATX Home Group. We absolutely love helping people just like you. Whether you're looking at moving here in 2 days or 2 years, you can reach out to us. All our information is down in the description below. You can schedule a call with us, text, call, email us anytime, days, nights, or weekends, and somebody on our team will connect with you and be able to walk you through this entire process. We've lived here for literally our entire lives, and we love it here. So we want to be able to share our passion for San Antonio and really help you dial into those specific areas that you're looking for and looking at moving to here in San Antonio. Now, one other interesting thing I've seen people talk about is that they are concerned that the overconsumption of power by these data centers is going to drive up the overall price of power for the residents of the areas. So if you're in San Antonio, you know that your power is supplied by CPS Energy. And currently these data centers out on the west side of town are pulling about 324 megawatts of energy. And by the end of 2028, with the new data centers that are popping up, that's supposed to be several times that afterwards. Now, here's something that did surprise me. Some energy experts are actually saying that they expect the overuse of this energy grid, this is confusing, but it's what they've said, is going to actually lower or could potentially lower the rates of energy as a whole for the regular consumers. Somehow the idea is that this higher cost is going to be spread out to a lot more different consumers with more people moving in and things like that, and thus the energy costs are going to go down. But again, to me, that still sounds kind of far-fetched. When it comes down to it, especially if you're looking at moving to these areas where these data centers are located, I mean, you just really have to pay attention to where you're moving to. If you're buying in a place that is going to be building a data center right next to it, or literally right behind your back fence and you can see it, that's a problem. If you're just in a general area of the data centers, I don't think it's going to do anything overall negatively to your property values after you purchase the property. There's a lot more market dynamics that matter a lot more than just being within a mile radius of a data center specifically. When it comes to the rural properties, however, that is going to be a bigger play because those things are going to affect especially the immediate surrounding properties very, very drastically. And for data centers that are built on more common roadways where you're having to drive past it constantly, or if you can see that light glowing in the distance when you're trying to be out and enjoying nature and enjoying the peace and quiet of your farm that you just purchased, that's another big thing that's going to drastically affect the values in that area, because that's just something completely out of the norm for what a typical farm and ranch property buyer would expect. So ultimately, do your homework specifically about these areas where these data centers are being built. See if the power and the water issues is something that you can be okay with, the research that is out there right now. And of course, just talk to us, give us a call. We can kind of talk through the options and kind of let you know whether or not this is something you need to be really concerned about, or if you should, move forward anyways and know that, okay, there's some risk of anything and everything happening all the time wherever you buy. But ultimately, the data center issue is not something that's as big a concern for you with the area that you're looking at. But again, those are conversations that we can have one-on-one. So go to that Calendly link in the description below, schedule a call, or shoot us an email. That's the easiest way to get in touch with us, and we can get on the phone with you guys and really talk through your specific situation. And if you are looking at more positives and negatives about moving here to San Antonio, I answered some of the most concerning questions about this area in this video right here. So take a look at that one. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. And until the next one, we'll see you there.